What is going on, YouTube? It is Primitive here, and welcome to the finals of the locals that happened at J&J's the other day. This is going to be between myself playing the Imperial that we saw me play the past couple rounds versus my opponent who is playing Shoutmon, who we also saw play round 1 versus the Lord Knight Security Control. So now we are going to face off here. As I mentioned before, I haven't really been playing Imperial, so I didn't play Shoutmon matchup ever before, and this was a matchup that I was kind of worried about playing just because of the ability of Shoutmon to be able to swing so many checks and also have the ability to swing over my Digimon and delete them on Digivolution. Could make this matchup very difficult. So going into this, I knew that I was going to have to try to outpace my opponent if I was going to have a chance. If they were just going to go into Shoutmon here, then I just have to hope that they don't have the Zeeg. But as we see, they'll put the Zeeg underneath, which allows them to swing over the Dino B. So now I'm already very far behind right off the bat because my opponent has a Shoutmon that's built up with multiple security checks on it and just swung over my ultimate, so now I can't even go into Imperial. So my opponent's going to promote the Agumon, and then they're going to swing the security checks, which isn't the worst thing for me because anytime they do swing, I do have multiple security checks in there. But as we see, they actually hit the Nidhogg when they are only at they're at 12k. They didn't have any DP boost, they just had the security attack boost, so they died to the first check. So that kind of evened up where we were at after them going the Shoutmon over my Dino B, because now I can go ahead and Digivolve, going to 1 and unsuspending with the Imperial and put my opponent at 1. And then once again, they're in a situation where as long as they don't have the Zeeg to put underneath Shoutmon, or as long as they don't go Zeeg and then Shoutmon after, then my Imperial is going to be safe for now, and I will be looking pretty good. So my opponent's going to Digivolve into Shoutmon, but as we're going to see, once again, they are going to have Zeeg, and they have the Agumon underneath them, which gives them the 1k DP boost, putting them at 13k, so they do get to swing over my Imperial. So now I'm in a very, very bad position. If we were looking at this spot earlier and we thought it was going to be really bad, but now it's even worse because it happened once again. I already lost a couple of my ultimates when this deck already runs a little low on ultimates, just playing the 4 Dino B and the 4 Pyldra. So losing multiple ultimates is going to make it a lot harder to get to my Megas, which is going to be necessary. I need to get into Imperial and go into Omni and get those type of swing checks going because my opponent's just going to outspeed me with those multiple security checks of the Shoutmon. And then there is a Greymon coming out, which has the security attack, so that could just go into an ultimate, which can get a security attack boost. So lots of security attacks coming out. I have to Digivolve and get the blockers out so that way I can at least survive. But if my opponent does go into another Shoutmon on top of this Shoutmon, and they can go ahead and pop at least one of them because they have the Zeeg underneath, going to Digivolve into the Shoutmon there, and they're going to put underneath a regular Shoutmon, and then the on Digivolution effects will go ahead and get to delete one of the Digimon. Right here, he thought that it was anything with a Shoutmon in it, but it's actually Omni Shoutmon, and so when he thought he was going to pop both the blockers there, he's actually only going to be able to pop one of the blockers, and then has the Blitz with Zeeg to go over my other blockers. So now both my blockers are gone, and that, although they did kind of stop a few checks, it doesn't really matter because going into next turn we're in a very similar position. So I have the Vmon with jamming, and I can go up into the Hammer Spark, and then I can go into the Tobiu, and then Digivolve into an ultimate. As we see here, we go into the Dino B, so I have another ultimate on board, hoping that my opponent doesn't go into another Shoutmon on top of this Shoutmon to potentially blitz over my Dino B, because if they do, then the game is relatively just over. The game is already very close to over because my opponent can swing all of my security checks right now, getting security attack +1 from the Greymon inheritable. So the Shoutmon's going to go ahead. It only has 1 check, but like I said, the ultimate can go ahead and check 2. So we're going to swing first. Lives the first check, and then it has the second check, which I forgot because at the time I didn't notice, but then it hits the Hammer Spark, so it will pass over to my turn, but I'm only at 2 memory, and I would need 2 Hammer Sparks to really do anything, because if I could get to 4, then I could Digivolve into the Imperial, swing over the ultimate, and then Digivolve the blocker, and then go into Omnimon to go over to the Shoutmon, but I don't have it, so nothing I can do there is going to save me, considering the amount of Digimon on the board, plus in the raising. So Going into game 2, I did decide to go second once again. I just really enjoy going second. I really think it's better in a lot of decks, and especially in a matchup where I want my opponent to extend their mega before I extend my mega, because their mega can just clear my mega. So I don't really mind too much being one turn ahead. Our actual output of security attacks is going to be relatively the same, so I don't have to worry about that as much, but my opponent is going to go into Lava Garita, and that's going to put me at 1, so I can do some Digivolving. I go into Lobo, puts my opponent at 1. It is unfortunate because if they go into Shout and then put a Zeeg underneath it or an Omni, then they can just go ahead and pop my Lobo for free, which is what I'm kind of worried about here, but I have to risk it, put my opponent as little memory as possible. I didn't want to play Davis there and put my opponent at such high memory. As we're going to see, my opponent is going to play the Omni, which is going to pop the Lobo, and then they're going to swing for 2 checks, and nothing there, so I am already feeling a little bit behind right now. I'm going to have to try and get ahead, but what I did notice is that my opponent does not have a rookie, so if I can find a way to get over or get rid of this Shoutmon or potentially use Kakaitis Breath, then I would be in a decent spot, because as we can see, they don't really have anything. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the Gorillamon and the Dino Bee off the Davis, because I do have a Imperialdramon in hand, so I don't really want to worry about grab it. I'd rather have the 1-2 Digivolve champion available for my Elecmon, and we're going to see my opponent go into a Monochromon in Raising. They are going to be able to swing some checks with the Shoutmon if they do decide, and they go ahead and go with the Delicate Plan, which is going to go ahead and shut down any Hammer Sparks or Kakaitis Breaths coming out, and I'm only down to 1 security now, so we're definitely not looking as amazing as I could be, but what we are going to do here is I have the ability to swing with the Dino Bee and then draw with Demi V, and then that allows me to get a relatively free security check and then go into Nidhogg. I decide to Hammer Spark there because I have my Davis, I'm fine on memory, I don't really need it to make dynamic plays. As you've seen, I've been trying to play a lot of defensive Hammer Sparks, as that's something that I've never really done a lot before, and that's something that I want to start testing, because although a lot of people say it's bad, it has felt pretty good when you are in a position where you have kind of a lead on the board, because like right there, doing what I did puts me in a position now where even I am down a couple Hammer Sparks, but I have memory, I have the board advantage, and I'm feeling okay. So putting my opponent to 3 as they would be instead of the 5 that I would have put them at without this Hammer Sparks, which we see now was not as big of a threat because all they did was play the Ty and Matt. And so I go ahead and Kakaitis Breath their only Digimon back to hand now, because they don't have anything in Raising to come up and they don't have any Digimon on board. So with what we see right now, I can swing with the 3 Digimon on board to clear the 3 swings, and then I have a Lobomon in hand to be able to go ahead and go for game. So my opponent just hard plays a Zeeg, so I'm going to go ahead and start swinging in. I decide to play the Lobomon here and swing, just in case I do hit some removal. Although it likely would have been better to swing with the Grizzly first, so that if I did hit removal, I would have still had the Lobomon. So a little bit of a mishap from myself there. It was the right idea, but I did coordinate it in the opposite order. But I'm going to go ahead and miss the rookie and just hard play the Tobiu turn 1, and my opponent responds by playing Ty, so they have the Memory Tamer, and I'm going to go ahead and respond to that Memory Tamer with my own Davis. This is not a matchup where I really want to be memory choked. If that happens, my opponent's going to be very far ahead, because we are both kind of a build up and swing type of deck. So if my opponent's consistently having 3 memory to build up every turn, and I'm not having 2 or 1, then I'm just going to be way too slow to really catch up. But we see my opponent go into a Fugamon, and I will go to 3, so I can start to develop a little bit here. I am going to go into the Dino Bee. I can swing, piercing, jamming, and get the check, hit the X antibody, so that's feeling pretty good, and can't be blocked by the Monochromon because of the piercing. And then I can go into Imperial just to unsuspend my Digimon and get an Imperial on board, so that way I'm threatening things like Omnimon and just having a more resilient Digimon. My opponent can go into an Ultimate and go into a Shoutmon if they want to, which would be very scary, and we're going to see them go into the Omni Shoutmon. And if they go into the Shoutmon here and play the Zeeg underneath it and then trade into my Imperial, it doesn't have any DP boost, so the trade would have to happen there. But if they did choose to do that, that could be a bit of an issue. The Omni Shoutmon's underneath, so my Gabumon does get cleared, and I'm kind of hoping for not to see the Zeeg underneath, but we are just going to see the Lava Garita, so there is going to be a second security check. I do get another Davis out, which means that I can kind of Lobomon there for free if I want to just cycle one of the Davises. I don't have to worry about losing one of the Tamers. So now heading into my turn, we are not looking in the most favorable position, just because this Shoutmon is very scary. You can stack them on top of each other, which can steamroll into a lot of other terrible things. And so I actually go into the Grizzlymon here, which is way better than Sealamon because I don't get popped by Shoutmon if that happens. And so I'm actually going to attempt to trade into the Shoutmon because I feel if I keep it alive, then I'm just going to be too far behind. I don't have the Imperialdramon underneath the Imperial, so it's not like I can go for 2 swings a turn with the Imperial. So going for the trade kind of resets the board a little bit. We're both sitting with champion blockers on board, but I do have a Dino Beamon in back ready to come back out and become another Imperial. So my opponent's going to go into the Metal Greymon to get the DP boost, and then I will swing Piercing Jamming to get a relatively free check and go into the Imperial. Unsuspending, I don't really want to stay suspended here because that gives my opponent the ability to attempt to swing into my Imperial without having to have the Zeeg. Obviously I have the Grizzly, which is going to help out in blocking, but I want to be able to make it so my opponent forces them to have the Zeeg to try to swing into my Imperial. So my opponent's going to have the Zeeg, try to swing into my Imperial. He has the boosts to pretty easily just swing over there, so I have to block to keep my Imperial alive, and then I'm going to have to attempt to try and trade again because once again we're in a position where if my opponent has this Shoutmon and starts swinging for multiple checks, especially with the DP boost going on, it's going to stay there forever. It can keep getting stacked on top of, and so I'm going to swing targeting. My opponent does block. I will still draw because I have jamming. And right now I'm really hoping that I have a Omnimon, but I'm not able to find it yet, so I am going to cycle one of the Lobomon or one of the Davis because like I said, I have 2 Davis out, so I can freely Lobo on top of one of them to get another Digimon out. You can see me hammer sparking to cycle, trying to hit the Omnimon, but I actually hit the Cocytus Breath, which is going to allow me to put my opponent to 7, but bounce the Shoutmon back into their hand. Now they have nothing on board, and even if they build up, they aren't able to swing, so they have enough memory to build up into a Shoutmon, and they could go ahead and delete a couple level 5s with the on Digivolution effect, but they can't attack for game. And with the Imperial staying on board and the Vmon in back, there is a very high chance that I just win, even if they do clear everything out. But as we see here, we just see a regular Shoutmon come out, which is not as good. You would want to see the Fugumon here. My opponent just trashed their cards that are supposed to go to the bottom of the deck. I don't really know how I missed that. That's kind of weird, but either way, I think we both just kind of knew that the game was over at this point. My opponent, after I played that Cocytus Breath, kind of was a little deflated in their effect, but they can't attack here, and so they can just Digivolve and pop the 2 5Ks, but then X-Swing comes over into my turn, and now I have 3 checks to their 1 security. Swing, swing, and that is game. So that was a really interesting set. I felt like it was really back and forth. It felt like there was really big swingy turns, so it was good to get that experience of that matchup for the first time. But I was able to win my first event with Imperial, so I'm feeling pretty good about that just because Imperial is a very fun deck, so I look forward to playing it some more. But with that being said, that is this week's J&J's tournament. Next week is their store championship, so I'll have coverage of that. But I hope you have a great day. If you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe. Peace out.